Welcome back to Part B of Chapter 15 on Supply Chain Management. We ended the Part A of the chapter talking about purchasing or procurement and also a little bit about e-business. And we'll continue along those same lines for the first part of Part B. And we'll introduce the concept of supplier management. So there's a lot of activities involved in the management of your suppliers or your vendors. They're shown here, and we'll go through these individually. So vendor analysis and supplier audits and supplier certifications. So as I said earlier, the identification of good suppliers is a strategic function. If we do a good job here, then a lot of good things are going to happen. And conversely, if we don't do a good job here, then a lot of bad things are going to happen, and we're going to have to do this over again until we finally get good suppliers. So the process of going about identifying who your suppliers should be begins with an analysis of the available suppliers that could potentially deliver the product to you. So identifying them, getting information about each of them, maybe doing some inquiries with some other companies to see what their reputation is, doing a supplier audit, which could involve a trip to the supplier to meet with individuals in their operations department, talk to the people themselves in order do you get a good gut feeling that this is a company that you wish to do business with. And then also possibly eventually certifying the supplier. So certification of supplier typically is something that you would not do at the beginning of the relationship with your supplier. But over time, when your supplier demonstrates a consistent ability to deliver a good quality product to you on a time schedule that meets your needs, then you could certify the supplier. When we certify the supplier, we certify that any material that we receive from them, there's no additional appraisal or inspection that is required, that it's the quality at the source idea that we talked back in the quality management chapter. So we have certified them. If they say that it's good, then it's good. So the type of relationship that we may want to have with each supplier can vary depending upon the importance of the material that we're purchasing from them. Also, taking into consideration the amount of money that we are investing in that company. So we could have a short-term relationship. In a short-term relationship, this is a relationship where we have a very minimal interactions with them. Most likely we would not do an audit. Most likely we would not certify them. Another type of relationship that we could have with a supplier is kind of a medium-term relationship where we do have some interaction, maybe some visits, but not a great deal. And then finally, long-term relationships. So this is a supplier that we expect to do business with for a very long period of time. And we want to have a very cooperative relationship with this supplier. We want to have a win-win relationship. We want them to succeed. And of course, we want to succeed. And in a long-term relationship, we're going to be doing some more collaborative things. We're going to be sharing information with them. We could be doing some joint planning together so that we have a synergy effect for both of us. So in a long-term relationship, We could have a strategic partnership. A strategic partnership is when two or more business organizations come together. They could have complementary products to each other. Another term that is used sometimes in this strategic partnering is called a joint venture. So more than one company can come together in a joint venture. These two could be companies that have different products, but they each bring to the marketplace kind of a unique core competency that each company is willing to share their unique core competency for the overall benefit of the partnership. Inventory management is critical in supply chains. One of the things that we have learned in supply chain management over the last 25 years is that there is always lots of inventory in the supply chain, but it always seems that the inventory is never quite in the correct location that it needs to be. So one important decision we talk about is in the inventory location. Some of our choices, we could have centralized inventories versus decentralized inventories. We need to think about the speed with which the inventory moves through the supply chain. And then there is a naturally occurring phenomenon that has been studied in academia for about the last 25 years related to inventory management in the supply chain. That's referred to as the bullwhip effect, and we'll talk about that last. We'll talk about that next, the bullwhip effect. So the bullwhip effect causes inventories in the supply chain to fluctuate much greater than they need to fluctuate and can cause the inventory management to go completely out of control. So if you take a look at the little diagram in the lower right-hand corner of this slide, you see a little man, and on his right hand, he is holding an object that is basically a bull whip. So a bull whip is a very long braided instrument that tapers down to a very, very small part of the tip. So the bullwhip has the bullwhip effect has the result of increased costs in the supply chain. If we have increased costs in the supply chain, that means that the overall return on investment in the supply chain will be less. The utilization of the resources is much reduced as well, and customer satisfaction decreases in the supply chain. So this is a diagram attempting to reflect what the bullwhip effect is. So imagine in this diagram, if you focus in on the horizontal line in the middle, you'll see on the far right-hand side the words final customer. On the far left-hand side, you'll see the words initial supplier. So that is essentially your supply chain across that horizontal line. And the blue line represents changes in demand. And you can also say that the blue line could also represent changes in inventory. So what the bullwhip effect does is this. If you take a look at the far right-hand side where it says final customer, the blue line, you see a little bit of variation, demand going down and then going up. The bullwhip effect has the phenomenon of as that information, demand information, is passed back into the supply chain, it somehow becomes distorted. It somehow becomes distorted. It somehow becomes exaggerated. And you can see that as you go back in the supply chain, the blue line is increasing in amplitude and it's also what we refer to as oscillating. It's going up and it goes down. It's like a roller coaster. It goes up and it goes down, it goes up and it's down. So what that means is that that poor company at the back end of the supply chain, they're at the back end of the bullwhip. And so what they are seeing from their customer is this very exaggerated demand in many cases that's not a reflection of the true demand at the final customer level. Now, the bullwhip effect has been around for a long time. The bullwhip effect is something that is not going to go away. It's going to be there. But there are some things that we can do to reduce the bullwhip effect. The title of this slide says mitigating the bullwhip effect, or reducing the amount of the exaggeration. So what good companies have done have tried to implement some of these activities to reduce the amount of the bullwhip. The first is some strategic inventory buffering. So keeping certain supplies of inventory at certain critical locations will reduce the effect of the amplification of demand back in the supply chain. Also, vendor-managed inventory is another way. So being able to share information and being able at any point in the supply chain of seeing what the actual demand is for the final customer has a very significant mitigating effect on the bullwhip. But vendor-managed inventory is a trend in supply chain management that has been going on for some time and will continue to go on, in which the responsibility for managing your inventories is passed along to your vendor or your supplier. So we say to our supplier, look, we not only want to buy these materials from you, but we are going to outsource to you the responsibility of managing our inventories. That means that if for some reason we don't have enough inventory to meet our customers, we're blaming it on you because we're giving you the responsibility of managing our inventories. So more and more we're seeing companies go to this vendor-managed inventory, or VMI, way of doing business. Fulfilling orders. So if we fulfill our orders, what is the process by which we do that? The ways that we can do that are shown in the bottom part of the slide. There's typically 4 ways. We'll start with the last bullet on the slide, a make-to-stock strategy for fulfilling orders. All retail companies use a make-to-stock strategy. What that basically means is we have to anticipate our customers' needs, and we have to have their materials in inventory, in stock, before they actually arrive to purchase it. The second bullet in the list is just the opposite, make to order, or MTO. In the MTO, make to order strategy, our strategy is that we will fulfill a customer's order only after they have given us the order. So some industries that work in a make-to-order environment, one would be the aerospace and defense industry. So if you think of Boeing Corporation, makes the large jumbo jet commercial airliners, they have no way of knowing what their customers are going to have to order. and it would be extremely expensive to try to build a jumbo jet, which has so many customizable features on it, and have it in stock before someone actually wants to buy it. So they have to wait until they negotiate a deal with a company, an airline, who wants to buy an airplane, and then they will make and produce to that order, but only after they get the order. Assemble to order is a strategy that is used by virtually all computer manufacturers. The assemble to order strategy, or ATO, is a combination of both the make to stock and the make to order. It's a combination. So computer manufacturers such as Dell and HP, they have to anticipate what types of materials they will need for different types of computers. They have to anticipate this at a component level like a keyboard or a display or a circuit board that goes into the computer. And they have to have those materials, those component materials, in stock before the company places the order. So that's make to stock. But the actual assembly of the computer does not take place until the customer orders the computer, because computers are such a highly customizable item, they can't anticipate all the different combinations of configurations that could take place. So they wait until the customer places the order for computers. Then they have the component materials, which they have already anticipated and hopefully have in stock, and then they can very quickly assemble the computer order to the customer specifications. And then finally at the very top is a engineer to order, which is a kind of an extreme case of the make to order. An extreme case would be that in the aerospace, in the defense industry, doing business with the military, that we're not even going to engineer the product, design the product until we get an order. So after we get an order from you, we will assign our engineers to engineer the product to your specifications. We'll now talk a little bit about logistics, which is a very important part of supply chains. So logistics has a couple of components to it. One of the major ones is the movement of materials from one location to the other. But another part of logistics is the storage of materials in a particular location. So in logistics, we could be moving materials within our facility, such as a manufacturing factory, or we could be moving materials into a distribution center, or moving them out of a distribution center to going to a retail store. This slide shows the movement within a facility. So as materials move from one work center to another work center, those work centers could be located at a significant distance apart from each other. So it could take some special material handling equipment, some forklifts, or there could be some other material handling equipment necessary for moving that around. We also have trucks that are going to be moving materials into our warehouse. And then after we finish the production, we have trucks that are going to be moving the material to the next destination that they go into the supply chain. So from an incoming and outgoing shipment point of view, one of the major activities is traffic management. So being able to manage all the different trucks as they come in and to efficiently have them pull up to the respective dock where they're going to be offloading their materials or unloading different materials. So traffic management and the loading of the trucks is a very critical thing. In some cases, the efficiency in which we move trucks in and out of our facility, the efficiency in which we empty the trucks, and the efficiency with which we load the trucks can make the difference between whether we are profitable or we are not profitable. Okay? We have to take, in some cases, government regulations into consideration, especially if we are moving any type of hazardous material. One of the technologies that is useful in logistics, but could be used in other things as well, is the technology we refer to as RFID, which stands for radio frequency identification. So RFID is a technology that uses radio waves that's been around for some time, and we can use RFID in a logistics environment for recording our inventory. So we would place onto our materials an RFID chip, and when the RFID chip comes in range of a RFID reader, then the chip will emit a radio wave, which the reader will read, and will know exactly what is in that material. So if you have a toll tag on your car, you have an RFID chip. So RFID, as you go through a toll booth, there is a reader at the toll booth which sends out a radio wave that hits your toll tag, and when your toll tag is interrogated, is the word they use, interrogated by the reader is basically saying, "Who are you?" Then your toll tag is going to emit a radio wave back and saying, "Here's who I am." RFID, from a historical point of view, RFID technology really goes back to World War II. So at the beginning of World War II, the British had essentially invented and implemented for the first time radar. And the radar beams were used to be able to detect aircraft that was approaching, but there was one particular problem. The radar beam had no way of knowing whether the aircraft that was approaching was your company's aircraft, your country's aircraft, or the aircraft of your enemy. So a technology was needed to be able to distinguish between the enemy's aircraft and your aircraft, and that's when RFID came about, and they refer to that as identification friend or foe, or IFO. In logistics, we have seen the growth of third-party logistics companies. So third-party logistics company is essentially a different organization, a different company that your company may choose to outsource the logistics function to. So the name of a third-party logistics company that we have dealt with here at the university and is very interested in hiring our students is the third-party logistics company XL, EXEL. And so what these companies do is they undertake to store a company's materials in their warehouse, and whenever an order is received for those materials, to package and to deliver that material to whoever it goes to next. So how do we create an effective supply chain? Well, there's a great deal that goes into creating this. There's a lot of strategic things that have to take place. An important strategic thing is referred to as strategic sourcing. So strategic sourcing is the identification of who are the few key suppliers who we can use to help us reduce our overall costs. So strategic sourcing is going to involve a great deal of trust between your company and your supplier, as well as communication and collaboration and coordination between the two different companies. On the opposite end of supply chain is reverse logistics. So when we looked at the diagram for supply chain, one of the flows that we identified was the material flow. And the material flow flows from the back end of the supply chain to the front end of the supply chain. But after your customer has purchased your materials, there is a possibility that there could be a defect or there could be a need to return that material. So if the material has to be returned to the manufacturer or the producer, we refer to that as reverse logistics. So moving materials in the opposite direction or reversing the flow. And the management of reverse logistics is extremely complicated. And there's a lot of areas for improvement in supply chains. Some of the difficulties that are involved with reverse logistics is in the area of gatekeeping. And what we mean by that is many products have a warranty associated with it, but the warranty periods are not that long. They could be 90 days. They could be maybe a year at the most. So we need to have some way of, if materials are going to be sent back, of checking even before they are sent back as to whether they are valid still within their warranty period. So someone needs to be the gatekeeper to be able to check to make sure that that material is valid for returning. And another thing that many companies do is to try to avoid as much as possible that material being returned. I've noticed in a number of items that I have purchased, if you open the box and you read through the materials, you'll find a sheet of paper that has in very, very large print, please call this telephone number if you have any difficulty at all in getting your product to work. And the reason why they put that piece of paper in there is that there are so many people who never read instructions on how to get something to work, and so they try to do it on their own, and they can't get it to work, where in fact there's nothing really wrong with the product. It's just that the customer never really took the trouble of reading the instructions on how to get it to work. Well, the customer's patience is very low, and so they'll take it back to the store and say, this thing doesn't work. And so it gets returned to the manufacturer, where in fact there's nothing really wrong with the product. So they put that piece of paper in there to try to avoid that material being returned at all. So we have a lot of challenges in supply chain management, and they're shown here, and we'll talk a little bit about them in the upcoming slides. So one is lots of trade-offs that we have to make in supply chain, okay? We have to balance one thing against the other. So trading off of lot sizes. Lot sizes is determining the quantity of the order that we're going to make. So if we have large lot sizes, we have the benefit of usually lower costs. But if our lot sizes are too large, then we have excess inventory. And if we're not able to sell that excess inventory, then we have reduced our profitability. Another is inventory transportation cost trade-off, okay? So whenever we ship things out in trucks, logistics, what we'd like to have is we'd like to have the truck as full as possible. It costs a lot of money to ship empty airspace in a truck. So the more space we're able to take up in the truck, then we're able to really utilize that space to we get the best, lowest cost. But on the other hand, if we wait until we have a full truckload, that might take more time in order to fill up that truck, and our customer satisfaction could be lower as a result of that. One of the techniques that is used in logistics that was invented by Walmart, and they do an excellent job at it, is the concept of cross-docking. And in cross-docking at a distribution center, a material which arrives on an incoming inbound shipment is taken off of the truck, but is never put into any type of a shelf or bin, but goes directly to the other side of the distribution center to the outbound trucks are located, and is placed on a skid and will go onto an outbound truck without ever going into some type of a storage location. So cross-docking is a very efficient way of moving material through the distribution center, and we avoid the costs of putting something into inventory and then having to take it out of inventory to put it on a truck. We also have trade-offs on lead time and transportation costs, as well as product variety and inventory trade-off. So whenever we have different varieties that we could have, different sizes, different colors, that means that we have to have a certain amount of inventory for each one of those. Well, one of the strategies that we could use to help reduce our inventory when we have to have different product variety is a strategy that is shown in the bottom part of the slide, referred to as delayed differentiation. So delayed differentiation is we want to delay as late as possible the differentiation of different colors, for example, or different varieties. Let me give you a couple of examples of delayed differentiation. A couple of years ago, I was had stopped at a fast food restaurant. It was a very hot day, and I decided that I would like to order a shake. And my preference in shakes is I like the strawberry variety. And of course, the three varieties that the fast food restaurant supplied to their customers was vanilla and strawberry and chocolate. Well, I had pulled up to the drive-through window, ordered the strawberry shake, and normally I don't pay that much attention to what the employees are doing inside, but I just happened to be glancing over when the employee was fulfilling my order. And this is what I observed. The employee took a cup and had a container that was filled with vanilla with vanilla shake material. Then the employee went over to another little dispenser and dispensed some strawberry flavoring. And then finally went to another area where it was mixed in together. So that was an example of delayed differentiation. So instead of having a container of strawberry shakes, another of chocolate shakes, another of vanilla shakes, they basically have one type of shake, vanilla, and then they wait until the customer chooses whether they want vanilla or chocolate or strawberry. And if they choose chocolate and strawberry, they apply the flavoring, mix it up, and now they have the product. And they only had to keep one type of inventory. So that is a very simple example of delayed differentiation. We also have trade-offs between overall costs and customer service too, okay? And then finally, disintermediation. Disintermediation. So disintermediation basically means reducing one or more steps in the supply chain by cutting out one of the materials. So it's possible if you wanted to buy a product to go directly to the manufacturer of that product, go to their website and to purchase that product through their website. That would be an example of disintermediation, going directly to the customer. So supply chain management is a very important operations strategy. Another important strategy that we could add to our list, that good companies are going to manage their supply chains because in some cases their supply chains are competing against their competitors' supply chains, and whichever company has the better supply chain is going to be the successful company. It requires a great deal of integration among the companies, a great deal of communication and relationship between all the companies in the supply chain. Supply chains are becoming more complicated every day, and it is for this reason that companies want to hire bright young minds like our students to work in this area of supply chain management. This concludes Part B of this chapter.